How a Nighthawk was shot down. March 27, 1999. 8:15 in the evening. Somewhere over the Serbian countryside, in the dark. There is no moon. The clouds are thick and low and the rain has been coming down since afternoon, and none of that matters to Lieutenant Colonel Darrell Zelko because he is flying a machine that does not need clear skies to do its work. He is flying at roughly 200 feet above the terrain, cutting through weather that would ground most aircraft, and the aircraft he is flying is not most aircraft. The F-117 Nighthawk is 65 feet long and looks like nothing that should be able to fly. A flat, angular shape built entirely of radar-absorbing surfaces, its edges carefully calculated to scatter and absorb incoming radar energy rather than bounce it back to the antenna that sent it. On a radar screen, this aircraft appears as a return roughly the size of a tennis ball. Not a 65-foot bomber carrying precision-guided munitions. A tennis ball. A smudge. Something that a radar operator, if he sees it at all, might dismiss as noise. Zelko has flown this aircraft on 39 missions. 39 times he has crossed into defended airspace, dropped his bombs, and come home. 39 times the Serbian air defense network, the most sophisticated the United States had encountered since the Gulf War, had not gotten a lock. Not once. Not a radar ping that lasted long enough to matter. Not a missile that found its target. Tonight is number 40. His target is the command center of the Serbian Air Force in Belgrade. He carries 2 laser-guided bombs. He has an escort of F-16 Vipers with anti-radiation missiles designed to kill any radar that illuminates them. The weather is terrible, the mission is straightforward, and there is no reason tonight should be different from the 39 nights before it. Then the radio crackles. This is Joint Forces Air Component Commander. Weather conditions require the escort to return to base immediately. Zelko listens to the F-16's acknowledge and turn away. He flies on alone. He does not know that 60 miles ahead of him, in a field outside the town of Budanovci, a Serbian army officer named Zoltán Dani has been waiting for exactly this moment for 3 years. That Dani has been studying the Nighthawk's mission patterns, its approach routes, its timing. That Dani has a theory about how to kill an aircraft that is not supposed to be killable. That Dani has already turned on his radar. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand what the F-117 was and what it was not. Because in 1999, most people, including some of the people making decisions about how and where to use it, believed the Nighthawk was something close to invisible. Something that existed outside the normal rules of air combat. A weapon so advanced that the question of defending against it was almost theoretical. This belief was not unreasonable. The F-117 had been the most tightly guarded secret in the United States Air Force for most of its operational life. Developed at the legendary Skunk Works facility at Lockheed in the late 1970s and early 1980s, it had been kept so secret that it flew only at night for the first several years of its existence, its very presence denied by the government, its name and shape unknown to the public until 1988. When it was finally revealed, the photographs looked like something from a science fiction film. All sharp angles and dark surfaces, nothing like the smooth curves that most people associated with aircraft. The stealth technology worked by exploiting a fundamental principle of radar physics. Radar works by sending out radio waves and detecting the energy that bounces back from objects in its path. The stronger the return, the larger or more reflective the object. The F-117's designers had spent years calculating precisely how to shape every surface of the aircraft so that incoming radar energy was scattered away from the source rather than reflected back toward it. The result was an aircraft with a radar cross-section of approximately 0.001 square meters, roughly the size, as people like to say, of a steel marble. But stealth was not invisibility. This distinction mattered, and it was a distinction that Zoltán Dani understood better than almost anyone in the Serbian Air Defense Network. Dani was 43 years old in 1999. He had grown up in Yugoslavia, joined the military, worked his way through the ranks of the air defense system, and developed, over years of study, a specific and unusual expertise. He did not think about radar the way most air defense officers thought about it. Most officers thought about radar as a tool for finding things. Dani thought about it as a physics problem, as a question of which frequencies interacted with which shapes in which ways, and whether there were frequencies that the F-117's designers had not fully accounted for. He commanded the 3rd Battalion of the 250th Air Defense Missile Brigade, equipped with the Soviet-designed SA-3 Neva missile system. The SA-3 was old. It had been designed in the 1950s and deployed widely through the Cold War, and by 1999 it was considered obsolete by most Western military planners. Its guidance radar operated at frequencies that were well within the range that the F-117 had been designed to defeat. But Dani's battalion also had something else. AP-18 early warning radar, an older Soviet system that operated at a much lower frequency than the targeting radar, roughly 175 MHz, in the VHF band. And Dani had a theory. The F-117's stealth shaping had been optimized against the higher frequencies used by most modern surface-to-air missile targeting radars. At those frequencies, the angled surfaces did their work beautifully, scattering the energy in every direction except back toward the source. But at very low frequencies, VHF frequencies, the kind the P-18 used, the physics changed. The wavelengths were long enough, relative to the aircraft's dimensions, that the normal rules of radar cross-section reduction began to break down. Dani believed that at VHF frequencies, the Nighthawk was detectable. He could not prove it through official channels. The Serbian military, like most militaries, had institutional resistance to unconventional theories from battalion commanders. But he could test it. And over the months leading up to NATO's air campaign against Yugoslavia, as the political situation deteriorated and it became clear that American aircraft would eventually be flying over Serbian territory, Dani had been doing exactly that. He had been quietly running his P-18 during training exercises, tracking contacts, building a picture of what a low-frequency return from a stealth aircraft might look like. He had developed procedures for his crew that were different from standard doctrine, procedures designed to maximize the probability of detection in the specific frequency range where he believed the Nighthawk was vulnerable. When NATO's bombing campaign began on March 24, 1999, Dani was ready. The campaign had been building for months. The proximate cause was the Serbian government's treatment of the Albanian population in Kosovo, a province of Yugoslavia with a majority Albanian population that had been subjected to systematic repression, displacement, and violence by Serbian security forces in 1998 and 1999. NATO had issued ultimatums. The Serbian government had not complied. On the night of March 24, the air campaign began. The United States and its NATO allies had assembled a force of roughly 1,000 aircraft. They were flying from airbases in Italy, from carriers in the Adriatic, from bases in Germany and England and across Western Europe. The Serbian air defense network was formidable by regional standards, a layered system of radar installations, surface-to-air missile batteries, and interceptor aircraft that had been maintained and partially modernized in the years since the breakup of Yugoslavia. But the NATO planners were not particularly worried about Serbian air defenses. They had the F-117. They had other stealth assets. They had electronic warfare aircraft that could jam and suppress radar systems. They had anti-radiation missiles designed to kill any radar that powered up. The Serbian network, they calculated, could be degraded quickly, its most dangerous elements destroyed in the first nights of the campaign before it could threaten the non-stealth aircraft that would make up the majority of the strike packages. This was not an unreasonable calculation. It was, in broad terms, how things worked out. Serbian air defenses suffered significant losses in the opening nights. Radar installations were hit. Missile batteries were destroyed. The network was degraded, but it was not eliminated. And Dani's battalion, operating under strict emission control procedures that Dani had developed specifically to avoid attracting anti-radiation missiles, was still functioning on the night of March 27. Dani had been following the campaign closely. He had been watching the patterns, which corridors the strike aircraft used, which altitudes they flew, how long after dark the missions typically launched, how the weather affected routing decisions. He had informants, or received intelligence through channels he has never publicly specified, that gave him advance notice that stealth aircraft were operating in his area. He had been waiting for the right moment. A moment when conditions aligned, when a stealth aircraft would be in his coverage area, when the weather would reduce the effectiveness. of the escort fighters, when the geometry of the approach would give him the best possible detection opportunity. March 27, 1999, was that moment. In his operations center, Dani gathered his crew in the late afternoon. He told them what he knew and what he suspected. He told them the escort aircraft would probably be recalled because of the weather. He told them that if a stealth aircraft came through his sector tonight, this was their best chance. He told them to be ready. At 8 p.m., Dani ordered the P-18 to power up. The screen filled immediately with electronic noise, rain, clouds, atmospheric clutter. At VHF frequencies, weather was visible, and the screen was thick with it. His operators scanned, looking for the specific signature he had described to them in training. Not a strong return. Not something that would jump out. A small, faint, coherent dot moving through the clutter. Something that behaved differently from weather. Something with a consistent track. For several minutes, the screens showed only weather. Then one of his operators said, "I see something." Dani looked at the screen. There it was. A small dot, barely distinguishable from the background clutter, but moving. Moving consistently. Moving on a track that matched what he would expect from an aircraft approaching on a mission profile. He said, "The ghost is here." He ordered the SAW-3's targeting radar to activate. This was the dangerous moment. Activating the targeting radar meant broadcasting on a frequency that NATO's anti-radiation missiles were designed to home on. If there was a Wild Weasel aircraft in the area, an F-16 carrying HARM missiles, specifically designed to detect and destroy radar emissions, powering up the targeting radar could mean the end of his battery in 60 seconds. But Dani had calculated the risk. The weather had driven the escort aircraft back. The anti-radiation missile threat was reduced. The window was narrow. He ordered the targeting radar on. Nothing happened. The operators scanning their screens reported no lock. The SAW-3's guidance radar, operating at its normal frequency, was finding nothing. The Nighthawk's stealth surfaces were doing their work perfectly at the higher frequency band. Dani stared at the P-18 screen. The dot was still there. Still moving. Getting closer. He needed the targeting radar to get a lock. Without a lock, his missiles had nothing to guide on. He had detection but not the solution he needed. And then Zelko opened his bomb bay. At the moment Zelko released his bombs over Belgrade, the F-117's geometry changed. The bomb bay doors, swinging open to allow the weapons to drop, disrupted the careful angular geometry of the aircraft's stealth surfaces. For a brief window, seconds, not minutes, the radar cross-section of the Nighthawk increased. Not dramatically. Not to the level of a conventional aircraft. But enough. One of Dani's operators said, "I have it." Then another. "I have it." The SAW-3's targeting radar had gotten a lock. It was not a strong lock. It was not the kind of clear, definitive radar picture that the system had been designed to work with. But it was enough. Just barely enough. Dani said, "Launch." Two SA-3 missiles left the launcher in rapid succession, their rocket motors igniting and driving them upward through the rain and cloud at nearly 3 times the speed of sound. They climbed toward the track the targeting radar had established, their onboard guidance systems updating as they flew, following the fragile thread of the lock that Dani's operators were fighting to maintain. In his cockpit, 6 kilometers above the ground, Zelko's aircraft screamed at him. The lock alert. The one sound he had never heard on a combat mission. The sound that told him the game had changed. He looked left. Through the clouds below him, he could see the exhaust plumes of the missiles. They were climbing fast. They were climbing toward him. There was no chaff in the F-117. No electronic countermeasures of the kind that other aircraft carried to break radar locks and seduce missiles away from their targets. The Nighthawk's designers had made a philosophical choice. If the aircraft was never detected, it would never need countermeasures. Detection was the vulnerability that the stealth design was supposed to prevent entirely. The design had worked on 39 missions. On the 40th, Zelko had nothing to fall back on except his hands and his instincts and the performance envelope of a 65,000-pound aircraft that was not, in any meaningful sense, a dogfighter. He pulled back on the stick and climbed, trying to increase the geometry between himself and the missiles, trying to force them to extend their flight time and burn their energy. He jinked left, then right. The G-forces pushed him down into his seat. The first missile screamed past his canopy and kept going. A malfunction in the proximity fuse. It should have detonated within lethal range of the aircraft. It didn't. He had 1 second, maybe 2, to think he might survive this. The second missile did not malfunction. It detonated in the cloud of shrapnel that proximity fuses are designed to create, just close enough to the left wing of the F-117 to fill it with fragments. The entire left side of the aircraft disintegrated. The wing was gone. The aircraft, which required perfectly calibrated aerodynamic surfaces to maintain its unnatural flight, immediately departed controlled flight. Zelko felt the world spin. The G-forces built as the aircraft entered a spiral. 7 gigaseconds. 7 times the force of gravity pressing him into his seat, pressing the blood from his brain, pressing his arms down so that every movement required fighting against a weight that felt like 100 pounds on each limb. He reached for the ejection handles. He pulled. The canopy blew. The seat fired. For 1.5 seconds that Zelko would later describe as the longest seconds of his life, he was in free fall, strapped to the seat, conscious enough to think that the seat had malfunctioned, that he was still inside the tumbling aircraft, that he was going to die. Then the parachute opened. He was alive. Below him, in the rain and dark, his burning Nighthawk was spiraling toward the ground. Above him, his parachute was bright orange. He thought, man, Mom is not gonna be happy about this. He hit the ground in a field. He ran for a ditch he had seen during the descent and got into it and covered himself with mud and lay still. The news of the downed aircraft spread through the Serbian countryside with the speed that significant news always travels. Within minutes, flashlights were moving in the fields around him. Trucks were on the road. Men were searching. Zelko lay in the mud and did not move. He had his survival radio. He activated it and transmitted. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Vega 31. Vega 31. Going down. The call was heard. What followed was an hour and 40 minutes that Zelko has described in interviews with the specific clarity of a man who has replayed the sequence many times. The sounds of search parties moving through the fields around him. The moment when a dog found his ditch and came close enough that he drew his knife, calculating whether he could kill it silently, deciding he could not, going still as stone and waiting while the dog sniffed and eventually moved away. The radio call from the rescue team. Vega 31, Sandy 01. Is it okay to come down there? His pause before answering. The peaks out of the ditch. The flashlights in the distance. The decision to say yes. His infrared strobe failed. He used the backup. A flare. Bright orange light spilling across the field, pointing him out to the rescue helicopter and to every Serbian searcher in the area simultaneously. Snuff your flare, the radio said. It blinds our night vision. He grabbed the burning flare and pushed it into the mud. The rescue helicopter came down in the field in front of him, rotor wash flattening the wet grass, and he ran for it as the Serbian search parties converged on the light. The helicopter lifted off. He looked back at the landing site as it shrank below him. People were already crossing the field. They had missed him by seconds. In his operations center, Zoltán Dani already knew the aircraft was down. His radar had tracked the debris falling. His communications network had confirmed impact. He walked out into the rain and looked at the sky for a moment. Then he went back inside. When asked later what it felt like, he said, like scoring the winning goal in a football match. He remained careful. His battery had exposed itself by powering up. He changed position. He maintained strict emission control. He survived the war. The wreckage of Zelko's Nighthawk was found by Serbian forces the next morning. The United States, occupied with the ongoing air campaign, did not bomb the wreck before the Serbians could reach it. Pieces of the aircraft, pieces of the most closely guarded stealth technology in the American military inventory, were recovered and photographed and eventually displayed in the Museum of Aviation in Belgrade, where they remain today. Some of those pieces went elsewhere. Serbian officials have acknowledged, and American intelligence analysts have assessed, that fragments of the Nighthawk were made available to foreign military technical teams in the days after the shootdown. Which countries? Which pieces? What information was extracted from them? These questions have never been fully answered in public. The F-117 continued flying combat missions for the rest of the Kosovo campaign and beyond. The shootdown did not ground the fleet. American planners adjusted tactics, varying routes, adjusting timing, increasing escort coverage, being more careful about bomb bay door exposure. The Nighthawk flew its last combat mission in 2008 and was retired from service. Zelko returned to flying. He flew further combat missions after Kosovo. He eventually retired from the Air Force with a distinguished career behind him. For years, he said he wanted to find Dani, to meet the man who had shot him down, to understand how it had been done. In 2011, 12 years after the night over Budanovci, they met. The circumstances of the meeting have been described by both men in interviews. They sat across from each other and talked for a long time. About the mission, about the radar, about the physics of what had happened and the decisions both men had made. Zelko said later that Dani was a professional, that he respected what Dani had done, that the encounter helped him make sense of a night that had never fully made sense before. Dani said that he bore no personal animosity toward Zelko, that it had been a military engagement between professionals, that he was proud of what his crew had accomplished but understood that the man in the cockpit was a soldier doing his job. They shook hands. The lessons of March 27, 1999 did not stay in Belgrade. They traveled. The debate within American and Allied militaries about what the shootdown meant was immediate and continues in some form to this day. The F-117 had been the foundation of a doctrine, the belief that stealth technology provided something close to absolute protection in the air, that an aircraft operating within its design parameters could penetrate defended airspace with near total impunity. That doctrine was not destroyed by what Dani did, but it was qualified. It was made more complicated. The VHF detection capability that Dani exploited was not a secret after 1999. It had been theoretically understood. What Dani demonstrated was that theoretical vulnerability could be exploited in the real world by a skilled and patient operator working with equipment that was a generation older than what it was targeting. Passive radar, sensor fusion, the integration of multiple radar systems at different frequencies to build a detection picture that no single system could provide. These technologies, which had been theoretical or developmental in 1999, accelerated in the years after Budanovci. The question that Dani had answered, can old radar kill a stealth aircraft, drove investment in new approaches to air defense that are still shaping military technology development today. The F-117 was the most advanced operational aircraft of its era. It was shot down by a system that had been designed in the 1950s, operated by a man who had spent years thinking carefully about physics and patience and the gap between what an aircraft was supposed to be able to do and what it could actually do under specific conditions. Dani did not have better technology than Zelko. He had a specific, narrow insight that he had developed over years and applied at exactly the right moment. He had studied his opponent more carefully than his opponent had studied him. Zelko spent a night in a ditch in the mud in Serbia, and then he went home. Dani stayed in his country, which had lost the war his missile had been one small part of, and went back to his life. They met in 2011 and shook hands. And somewhere in Belgrade, behind glass in an aviation museum, pieces of the most secret aircraft the United States had ever built sit in the open air, available for anyone who buys a ticket to examine. The ghost came down to earth. It's still there.